Say congratulations to the woman I chose instead of you." Beatatrice Holay stood frozen as her former fiancé draped an arm around the elegant woman beside him, smiling as though the years they had once shared had never mattered. "You should thank me," Vanessa added sweetly. "If she hadn't settled for being ordinary, I never would have found such a successful man." The shop fell silent. No customer looked away. Beatrice forced herself to smile, refusing to let them see her breaking. Then a calm voice interrupted. "That's enough." A tall man stepped forward. Lucien Armand, billionaire, respected businessman, and the hidden leader of one of the world's most feared mafia organizations. Without asking permission, he gently lifted Beatrice's chin, pressed a kiss to her forehead, then softly kissed her lips before everyone. Looking straight at her stunned ex, he said, "The only woman anyone should envy today is the one you were foolish enough to lose." Silence swallowed the room. No one understood why the most powerful man there had chosen to protect the woman everyone else had just mocked. For several seconds, no one moved. Nolan's face drained of color, as if the world had slipped out from beneath his feet. Vanessa's confident smile cracked first, then disappeared entirely. She looked from Lucien to Beatrice and back again, searching for some hint that the kiss had been rehearsed, some sign that they were conspiring to embarrass her instead. She found none. Lucien remained perfectly composed, one hand resting lightly at his side, while Beatrice stood motionless, her eyes impossibly wide. Around them, customers began whispering. Someone discreetly reached for a phone. Another quietly started recording. Nolan attempted a laugh. "Well, that's certainly dramatic." Lucien regarded him with an expression so calm, it somehow felt more intimidating than anger. "I believe you've said everything you came here to say." The words were polite. The meaning was unmistakable. "Leave." Vanessa tugged Nolan's sleeve. "We're going." He hesitated, pride battling common sense. Only when he noticed several customers staring at him with open disapproval did he finally turn toward the exit. Neither of them spoke again. The bell above the door chimed. Then they were gone. The silence they left behind felt strangely heavier than the confrontation itself. Beatrice slowly turned toward Lucien. "You?" she whispered. Her voice failed. She tried again. "You kissed me." "I did. In front of everyone." "Yes. You're completely insane." A few nervous customers laughed. Lucien surprised everyone, including himself, by smiling. "That is a possibility." Beatrice folded both arms tightly across her chest. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? I prevented cruelty from becoming entertainment. That isn't the point. It was to me." She opened her mouth, closed it again, then sighed so deeply her shoulders slumped. Nothing about this man made sense. He had always been the quiet customer who ordered desserts, thanked her sincerely, and left generous tips without asking for attention. She didn't even know his real name until 5 minutes ago. Now the entire city had watched him kiss her. One customer cautiously approached. "Excuse me." Both of them turned. Was that real? Neither answered. The customer smiled anyway. I hope it was. Within minutes, videos from inside the dessert studio began spreading online. One clip captured Nolan mocking Beatrice's appearance. Another showed Vanessa's smug expression. But the final 12 seconds dominated every repost. Lucien stepping forward, the gentle touch beneath Beatrice's chin, the kiss, his quiet declaration. Comments multiplied faster than anyone could read them. Some called it the most romantic moment of the year. Others insisted it had been staged. Many recognized Lucien immediately. That only made the story more unbelievable. Why would one of the world's wealthiest and most untouchable men publicly defend an ordinary dessert shop owner? By the time the last customer left, Beatrice dropped into a chair behind the counter and buried her face in both hands. "This is a disaster." Lucien remained standing. I owe you an apology." She looked up. "I acted without considering what it would cost you afterward. You think?" "Yes." She expected excuses. Instead, he quietly continued. "I came here intending to buy dessert and leave as I always do." His voice remained steady. "But when I heard him ridicule you, when I watched everyone waiting to see whether you'd cry, I stopped thinking." He paused before adding, almost reluctantly, "I've witnessed cruelty in many forms. I refuse to stand still while someone loses their dignity simply because others find it amusing." Beatrice studied him for a long moment. "You didn't know me well enough to do that." "No." "Then why?" Lucien's answer came without hesitation. "Because kindness deserves someone willing to protect it." Neither spoke again. Outside, notifications continued exploding across the internet. Inside, the quiet dessert studio, Beatrice realized her life had changed forever because one stranger had decided that watching her suffer was unacceptable. The next morning, Beatrice unlocked the dessert studio, expecting nothing more dramatic than frosting cupcakes and preparing birthday orders. Instead, she found 3 reporters waiting outside. The youngest hurried forward the moment she appeared. "Miss Holay, is it true you've been secretly dating Lucien Armand for months?" Another lifted a microphone. "When did your relationship begin? Did he really kiss you because he loves you?" Beatrice blinked twice. "No." The reporters exchanged confused glances. "No. What? No relationship. No secret dating. No romance. No hidden engagement." She sighed. "I baked a lemon tart yesterday. That's the most exciting thing that happened before all this." Unfortunately, nobody seemed interested in the lemon tart. By the time she managed to unlock the door, nearly 20 customers had wandered inside. Half genuinely wanted dessert. The other half wanted gossip. An elderly woman ordered 6 chocolate eclairs before leaning closer. "My granddaughter says you're marrying a billionaire." Beatrice nearly dropped the pastry box. "I most certainly am not." "Oh." The woman looked genuinely disappointed. "Well, I'll still take the eclairs." Within an hour, every table was occupied. Customers who had never visited before suddenly claimed they had always wanted to try the famous desserts. Teenagers quietly took selfies near the counter. Business owners stopped by simply to catch a glimpse of the woman who had somehow captivated the city's most untouchable man. Beatrice quickly realized people weren't just buying cakes. They were buying a story. Whenever someone whispered, she smiled politely. Whenever someone asked about Lucien, she answered exactly the same way. "He is simply a customer." No one believed her. By noon, social media had already created dozens of imaginary timelines. Some claimed they had met years ago in Paris. Others insisted Lucien secretly financed her business. One particularly creative post declared they had been engaged for months and were planning an extravagant wedding in Italy. Beatrice stared at her phone in disbelief. "I've never even been to Italy." Her assistant laughed so hard she nearly spilled icing. "Apparently you have now." Another customer approached. "So, what's he like?" "Quiet." "No, I mean romantically." "I wouldn't know, but he kissed you." "Yes." "So?" "So that surprised me too." The customer frowned. "You're terrible at celebrity gossip. I own a bakery." Late that afternoon, just as the crowd finally began to thin, the familiar sound of the front door chiming made Beatrice look up. Lucien entered, carrying the same calm expression as always. Except nothing about today felt ordinary. Every customer recognized him instantly. Conversations stopped. Someone nearly dropped a tray. Lucien walked directly to the display case, as though nothing unusual had happened. "Good afternoon." Beatrice folded her arms. "You've got excellent timing. I was hoping the crowd would have disappeared. They're here because of you. I suspected as much." What do you want? He studied the desserts thoughtfully. I'd like 12 cinnamon pastries. 12? My legal department enjoys cinnamon. She stared. Your legal department? They've had a difficult week. You're bribing lawyers with pastries. I find sugar improves negotiations. Despite herself, she laughed. It escaped before she could stop it. Lucien noticed. The smallest smile touched his face. I'll take that as confirmation. As she packed the order, another customer cautiously approached him. Mr. Armand, may I ask one question? You may. Are you dating Miss Holay? Lucien glanced toward Beatrice. She silently mouthed, Don't you dare. He looked back at the customer. I admire her. Technically true. Entirely unhelpful. The customer gasped. Within seconds, everyone inside the shop was smiling knowingly. Beatrice closed her eyes. You're making this worse. I answered honestly. You answered strategically. There is a difference. There is when the internet exists. He accepted the pastry boxes, paid, and prepared to leave. Then he paused. One more thing. Beatrice immediately became suspicious. What? I also need 4 strawberry cheesecakes. She frowned. You forgot them? No. Then why didn't you order them before? I wished to extend the conversation. She stared at him for several silent seconds. That might be the strangest flirting attempt I've ever witnessed. A faint color appeared across Lucien's cheeks. I wasn't aware I was flirting. You absolutely were. I see. He considered that information with complete seriousness. I'll try to become better at it. The shop erupted with quiet laughter. Even Beatrice couldn't stop smiling. When he finally left, carrying far more desserts than any reasonable person could possibly need, one little girl tugged gently on Beatrice's apron. Miss? Yes? I think the handsome man likes you. Beatrice looked toward the window where Lucien's car disappeared into afternoon traffic. She smiled helplessly. I think he's buying far too much cake. The child giggled. No, he's just finding excuses to come back. For the first time since the humiliating confrontation, Beatrice felt something replace embarrassment. Not certainty, not romance. Just the smallest, warmest spark of curiosity. Maybe the kiss had changed more than the internet. Maybe it had changed the way 2 lonely people looked at each other. For the next 2 weeks, life settled into a peculiar routine. Every morning brought another wave of curious customers. Every afternoon brought another rumor online. And almost every evening, Lucien Armand appeared with an entirely reasonable excuse to buy desserts that no ordinary person could possibly consume. One day, it was for a retirement celebration. The next, a product launch. Then an employee's birthday. Then someone's twins had finally come home from the hospital. Then a receptionist had completed 10 years with the company. Beatrice stopped questioning the orders. She simply baked. One rainy Tuesday, however, she noticed something unexpected. Lucien walked in before opening hours. The shop was still quiet. No customers, no reporters, no whispered speculation. Only the comforting aroma of fresh butter and vanilla. You forgot to lock the front door, she teased. I was invited. I don't remember inviting you. You said yesterday I could collect my order early. She laughed. I suppose I did. As she placed several carefully boxed fruit tarts onto the counter, Lucien watched her with the same quiet attention he always carried. Not admiration born from beauty, not fascination born from wealth. Something gentler, curiosity, almost gratitude. You remember everyone's names, he observed. She shrugged. It matters. You served nearly 80 customers yesterday. I know. You still remembered the elderly gentleman prefers less sugar. He has diabetes. And the little boy with the strawberry allergy. I changed his birthday cake recipe. And the woman collecting cupcakes this afternoon. Her daughter just graduated from medical school. Lucien smiled faintly. You remember everyone. Beatrice looked genuinely puzzled. Doesn't everyone? No. They should. She returned to tying ribbons around the pastry boxes, without realizing how profoundly that simple answer affected him. Just then, Nolan arrived carrying 2 professional cameras around his neck. Morning, B. He stopped abruptly after noticing Lucien. Oh. The photographer smiled politely. Didn't realize I was interrupting. You aren't, Beatrice assured him. Nolan helps photograph every seasonal collection. Lucien extended a hand. Lucien. Nolan. The handshake remained courteous, though Nolan couldn't ignore the quiet intensity behind Lucien's calm expression. We're shooting the summer menu today, Nolan explained. She creates incredible desserts. I know, Lucien replied simply. After collecting his order, Lucien prepared to leave. Then Beatrice suddenly called after him. Wait. He turned. You always buy desserts for celebrations. I do. What are you celebrating today? His answer surprised her. A janitor. She blinked. What? He has worked for my company for 32 years. So, he retires tomorrow. And he deserves excellent cheesecake. She stared at him. That's why you're buying all this. He dislikes speeches. Lucien adjusted the boxes in his arms. But he enjoys caramel. Then he left. Nolan watched the door close. He's different. Beatrice nodded slowly. That's what keeps confusing me. Later that afternoon, while sorting archived invoices inside a storage cabinet, Beatrice discovered something she had never noticed before. The same customer number. Again. 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 Nearly every week, different desserts, different occasions, always paid in full, always generous, always anonymous. She carried the old order forms into the kitchen. Nora? Her assistant looked up. What is it? Who was customer number 138? Nora smiled immediately. Oh, him. You knew? Of course. He started coming almost 8 months ago. 8 months? He never missed a week. Beatrice flipped through another folder. He ordered this many? Sometimes more. But why did nobody tell me? Nora laughed. Because he asked us not to. He what? He said he enjoyed being treated like every other customer. Beatrice lowered herself into a chair. 8 months. Long before Nolan had returned. Long before the engagement party. Long before the humiliating kiss. Lucien had already been quietly sitting near the window, drinking coffee, thanking the staff, asking about recipes, complimenting new flavors, and leaving before anyone could make a fuss. She suddenly remembered dozens of tiny moments she had dismissed. The man who always asked whether the apprentice baker's exams had gone well. The customer who remembered the cashier's injured wrist. The gentleman who never complained when orders were delayed. The stranger who always thanked everyone before leaving. It had always been him. That evening, Lucien returned for one forgotten pastry. At least that was the excuse. Beatrice was waiting. You've been lying to me. He looked mildly concerned. I hope not intentionally. You've been my customer for months. Yes, you never told me. You never asked. I thought we met because of Nolan. I met you because of cinnamon rolls. She couldn't help laughing. That's an absurd sentence. It happens to be true. He hesitated before continuing. The first morning I came here, no one recognized me. His voice softened. No one expected anything. No one feared me. You asked whether I preferred coffee before discussing business. I wasn't discussing business. Exactly. For the first time,
Beatrice saw something vulnerable beneath the polished composure. "In my world," Lucien admitted quietly, "every conversation has a purpose. Here." He looked around the little dessert studio. "People simply celebrate birthdays." She smiled. "And anniversaries, and retirements, and first jobs, and surviving difficult weeks." He nodded. "I had forgotten ordinary happiness could feel so valuable." Neither noticed how naturally silence settled between them. It was no longer awkward. It was peaceful. Beatrice realized she no longer saw the feared Mafia Boss everyone else whispered about. She saw the lonely man who had spent months searching for a place where nobody wanted anything from him except to choose dessert. And Lucien realized something equally unsettling. The woman he had first admired for her kindness had quietly become the one person with whom he felt entirely himself.
By the beginning of the following month, the excitement surrounding the famous kiss had finally begun to settle. People still whispered when Lucien visited the dessert studio. They still smiled knowingly whenever Beatrice blushed. But the constant reporters had disappeared, allowing life to resemble something almost normal again. Almost. Because Nolan had decided the shop deserved a complete visual makeover. "If your desserts are going viral," he announced one morning while unloading enough camera equipment to film a movie, "then your menu photos should look like works of art." Beatrice laughed. "I thought we were photographing cupcakes." "We are." "Then why do you have 6 lights?" "Because cupcakes deserve dramatic lighting." She shook her head. "You photographers are strange." Proudly. Within minutes, the studio transformed into organized chaos. Reflectors leaned against chairs. Tripods blocked half the kitchen. Fresh pastries waited beneath glass covers, while Nolan adjusted angles with almost scientific precision. No, he muttered. "Rotate the cheesecake 3 degrees. Beatrice stared. "You can see 3 degrees? I can feel 3 degrees. You definitely need a vacation." Her laughter echoed through the kitchen. At precisely that moment, the front door opened. Lucien stepped inside, carrying his usual calm expression. It disappeared almost immediately. He looked at the enormous camera, then at Nolan, then at Beatrice, who was laughing harder than he had ever seen before. Something unfamiliar settled in his chest, an emotion he recognized only because he had seen it ruin negotiations, friendships, and occasionally entire criminal alliances. Jealousy. He disliked it instantly. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. Beatrice smiled warmly. "You're just in time." To save me." Nolan protested. "Don't listen to her. She secretly enjoys this." "I secretly enjoy baking. I've spent 20 minutes convincing you that mint leaves should lean left. They looked perfectly happy leaning right." Lucien found himself smiling, despite the uncomfortable feeling lingering inside him. "What exactly is happening?" Nolan answered enthusiastically. "We're creating the new seasonal catalog." Lucien nodded as though he understood. He absolutely did not. "I see." Nolan handed Beatrice another dessert. "Hold it slightly higher." She obeyed. "No, lower." She lowered it. "Turn toward the light." She turned. "A little more." Beatrice sighed dramatically. "If I rotate any farther, I'm going to become a lighthouse." Lucien laughed before he could stop himself. Both of them looked at him in surprise. "You laugh," Beatrice observed. "Occasionally. I wasn't sure. I try not to waste them." Nolan grinned. "Perfect. You laughed naturally." Lucien frowned. "I wasn't posing." "Exactly." The photographer lifted his camera. "Stand beside Beatrice." Lucien blinked. "What?" "I need a comparison shot for the website." "You certainly do not," Beatrice interrupted. "It'll help demonstrate scale. They're desserts, Nolan. People like people." Lucien hesitated. I've never modeled before. Nolan smiled confidently. I can tell. The next 10 minutes became one long comedy of errors. Relax your shoulders. They are relaxed. No, they're negotiating. What does that mean? It means you're standing like you're buying a country. I have bought countries. Nolan stopped. That explains a lot. Beatrice burst into uncontrollable laughter. Lucien watched her double over, wiping tears from her eyes. The sound filled the room with an easy warmth he hadn't realized he had been craving. Later, Nolan adjusted another camera. Can you hold this reflector? Lucien accepted it immediately. He held it upside down. No, Nolan said gently. The silver side. Lucien turned it. Other silver side. There are two. Exactly. Beatrice laughed so hard she had to sit down. The world's most powerful businessman has been defeated by aluminum. I've negotiated with heads of state, Lucien replied gravely. No one prepared me for reflective circles. Even Nora peeked from the kitchen, struggling not to laugh. Hours passed more quickly than anyone expected. By late afternoon, the catalogue was finished. Nolan packed his equipment while Beatrice offered him a box of leftover pastries. For your help. My payment is seeing people smile after tasting your desserts. He winked playfully. And maybe these chocolate tarts. Beatrice smiled. You've earned both. Without thinking, Nolan reached over and gently brushed a streak of flour from her cheek. There. You missed a spot. It was an innocent gesture. Friendly. Natural. Lucien knew that. His expression remained perfectly composed. Inside, however, he experienced the remarkable urge to learn absolutely everything about photography before sunrise. The following morning, Beatrice nearly dropped her mixing bowl when Lucien arrived carrying 3 enormous shopping bags. What happened? I've purchased equipment. She looked inside. Professional cameras, studio lights, lenses, books titled Food Styling for Beginners. Another labeled Lighting Made Simple. She stared at him. You bought all of this? Yes. Do you know how to use any of it? No. Why? Lucien answered with complete sincerity. I intend to become surprisingly knowledgeable. She covered her mouth to hide another laugh. This has absolutely nothing to do with Nolan, does it? A pause. Perhaps a very small amount. A very small amount. Moderately small. She laughed so hard she nearly dropped an entire tray of macarons. For the first time in years, the dessert studio felt less like the place where she had been abandoned, and more like the place where happiness kept arriving, usually carrying far too many pastries, and now, apparently, expensive cameras no one knew how to operate. Nearly 6 weeks after the kiss, Beatrice believed the storm had finally passed. Orders had doubled. Corporate clients booked months in advance. Families recommended her shop because the desserts were genuinely good, not merely because of internet gossip. For the first time in years, success felt like something she had earned with her own hands. Then, an invitation arrived. The city's annual Children's Hope Charity Gala. One of Beatrice's dessert displays had been selected as the featured centerpiece for the evening. She almost declined. Large social events reminded her too much of the engagement party, where Nolan had once decided she wasn't impressive enough to stand beside him. Nora refused to let her hide. You aren't going because of him. I'm not? No. Then why? Because your work deserves to be seen. That answer was impossible to argue with. The ballroom shimmered with elegant gowns, tailored suits, and polished smiles. Beatrice adjusted her simple navy blue dress, suddenly wondering whether she belonged among CEOs, celebrities, and politicians. Before self-doubt could settle in, a familiar voice greeted her. You look relieved. She turned. Lucien stood beside her in a charcoal suit, looking effortlessly distinguished. I am. You expected someone else? I expected reporters. They're outside. She groaned. Wonderful. They'll become bored eventually. They've had nearly 2 months. They're remarkably persistent. She laughed softly. They learned from you. Before Lucien could answer, guests gathered around the dessert display. Children pointed excitedly at the miniature pastry village Beatrice had created. Parents smiled while photographing every detail. Several business owners congratulated her on the craftsmanship. For once, no one mentioned the kiss. They talked about chocolate, textures, recipes, creativity, exactly what she had always wanted. Then the atmosphere shifted. Vanessa Whitlock entered the ballroom, elegant as ever. Confident as ever. But confidence, built on comparison, rarely survives for long. She spotted Beatrice immediately. Then noticed Lucien standing comfortably beside her. Something dark flashed across her face. Vanessa crossed the room without hesitation. Her smile looked flawless. Her eyes did not. So, she examined Beatrice from head to toe. I suppose your little performance worked. Beatrice frowned. I'm sorry? You kissed a billionaire, and suddenly everyone knows your name. Nearby conversations began slowing. People sensed confrontation. Vanessa continued. I underestimated you. I never planned anything. Oh, please. Vanessa folded her arms. You spent years pretending to be harmless. Then the moment Nolan moved on, you found someone richer. The room became painfully quiet. Beatrice inhaled slowly. I won't argue with you, because you can't. I won't because nothing you said is true. Vanessa laughed sharply. You expect people to believe the world's most powerful businessman simply walked into a bakery and fell in love. No. I expect them to believe kindness still exists. Vanessa turned dramatically toward the surrounding guests. She wants everyone to think this fairy tale happened naturally. Her voice grew louder. She seduced him because she couldn't accept being rejected. Several uncomfortable glances shifted toward Lucien. He had remained silent until now, not because he lacked words, because he believed Beatrice deserved the chance to defend herself first. Now he stepped forward, calm, unhurried, certain. I believe that's enough. Vanessa smiled confidently. I'm only telling the truth. No. Lucien's voice never rose. You're repeating a story that helps you avoid an uncomfortable reality. And what's that? He looked at Beatrice before answering. I first became her customer, 8 months before that kiss. Murmurs spread instantly. Lucien continued. I visited her shop every week. I celebrated employees' birthdays with her cakes. I ordered desserts for retirements, for newborn children, for anniversaries, for ordinary people experiencing ordinary joys. He glanced around the ballroom. She never knew who I was. She never treated me differently. She remembered every employee's name, every customer's favorite dessert, every child's allergy. His gaze returned to Vanessa. Long before Nolan returned, I had already found something priceless in that little shop. Silence settled across the room. The kiss, Lucien said quietly, was never planned. I had no strategy. No arrangement. No expectation. I simply reached a moment where I refused to let cruelty win. He turned toward Beatrice. I would make the same decision again, not because she needed rescuing, but because no decent person should remain silent while another is humiliated. The applause began with an elderly woman near the back, then another. Soon the entire ballroom echoed with warm, genuine appreciation. Not for wealth, not for power, for simple decency. Vanessa's perfect composure finally collapsed. Without another word, she turned and walked away, realizing too late that she had spent months competing against someone who had never been competing at all. Beatrice looked at Lucien, her eyes shining with emotion. You didn't have to do that. I know. You keep changing my life. Lucien smiled gently. No, I merely told everyone the truth. For the first time since Nolan had shattered her confidence years earlier, Beatrice understood something that no compliment had ever managed to teach her. Real love never begins by comparing one woman to another. It begins by seeing someone's worth long before anyone else notices it.
The charity gala changed everything, for everyone except Beatrice. The internet praised her grace. Customers admired her talent. Even newspapers gradually stopped describing her as the woman kissed by the Mafia Boss and began calling her the pastry artist behind the city's fastest-growing dessert studio. She should have been happy. Instead, an uneasy thought refused to leave. Lucien belonged to a world of private jets, billion-dollar negotiations, and whispered power. She belonged to butter, flour, and handwritten recipe cards stained with vanilla. One evening, after closing the shop, she sat alone with a cup of tea, rereading hundreds of customer thank-you notes she had collected over the years. Every message reminded her why she had opened the studio, to make ordinary days feel a little more special. She smiled sadly. Perhaps ordinary was exactly where she belonged. The following afternoon, Lucien arrived carrying his usual order. Before he could speak, Beatrice quietly shook her head. "We need to talk." He immediately noticed the change in her expression. Of course. She invited him to the small table near the window, where he had spent so many quiet mornings, the place where he had first discovered peace without realizing it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Beatrice folded her hands together. "I think we've been pretending something." Lucien listened. "You deserve someone who understands your world." "My world?" "The people you meet, the responsibilities you carry, the danger that follows you." She looked down at her hands. "I bake birthday cakes." "You carry empires," he answered gently. "I never asked you to carry them with me." "I know." "Then why are you saying goodbye?" She smiled, though it hurt. "Because I don't want to become another person you have to protect." Lucien understood immediately. This wasn't rejection. It was fear disguised as generosity. Still, he respected it. "If distance is what you need," he stood slowly, "then I will give it to you." He didn't argue, didn't persuade, didn't promise impossible things. He simply wished her a quiet evening, collected nothing, and walked out carrying only the silence between them. Weeks passed. Customers continued arriving. Business continued growing. Life continued moving. Yet every afternoon around 4 o'clock, Beatrice found herself glancing toward the door before reminding herself there was no reason to expect anyone. Lucien filled his own days with meetings across 3 continents, boardrooms, contracts, security briefings. People obeyed every word he spoke. But when evening arrived, the victories felt strangely hollow. His assistant eventually asked the question no one else dared. "Sir, should I cancel the standing dessert order?" Lucien looked toward the untouched box sitting on his desk. "No." "You aren't eating them." "I know." "Then why keep ordering?" He smiled faintly. "Because hope occasionally requires poor financial decisions." 3 more weeks passed. Then, one quiet Saturday morning, the familiar bell above the bakery door rang again. Beatrice looked up instinctively. Lucien stood there. No tailored gift box, no flowers, no jewelry. Only a small white pastry box held carefully in both hands. She stared. "I didn't make that." "No." He walked toward the counter. "You made it 8 months ago." Confusion crossed her face. "I don't understand." He opened the box. Inside rested a simple honey almond tart. Nothing extravagant. Nothing fashionable. Just a humble dessert she had once been experimenting with before quietly removing it from the menu. "I kept the recipe card," Lucien explained. "You wrote a note on the back." She looked closer. In her own handwriting were the words, "Ordinary recipes become unforgettable when shared with the right people." She had forgotten writing it. He never had. I asked my pastry chef to recreate it exactly. "You remembered this?" "I remember the day." His voice softened. "It was my third visit. You apologized because the crust wasn't perfect. I told you it tasted like home." She felt tears gathering. "I remember." Lucien stepped closer. "I've spent most of my life surrounded by extraordinary things. Extraordinary wealth. Extraordinary influence. Extraordinary fear." He smiled gently. "But every time I entered this shop, I left feeling like an ordinary man." His eyes never left hers. "I didn't fall in love because I kissed you. I kissed you because, without realizing it, I had already spent months falling in love." He laughed quietly at himself. "It happened one birthday cake, one retirement cheesecake, one conversation, one cup of coffee at a time." There were no grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, only quiet honesty filling the little bakery. Beatrice finally whispered, "I was afraid I would never fit into your world." Lucien slowly shook his head. "You never needed to. My happiest world has always been yours." She looked around the tiny dessert studio, the flour-dusted counter, the handwritten menus, the familiar window, the place where she had rebuilt herself after heartbreak, then back at the man who had never once tried to change it. With tears shining in her eyes, she reached across the counter and gently took his hand. This time, neither of them needed courage borrowed from impulse, only the quiet certainty that love had already been growing long before either of them found the words to name it.
Months later, the little dessert studio no longer needed a viral story to attract customers. People came because the pastries were exceptional, because every cake carried someone's memory, because every customer walked out feeling noticed. Corporate orders filled weekdays. Birthday bookings filled weekends. Families traveled across the city simply to taste desserts they had once only seen online. Everything Beatrice had dreamed of was finally happening. Not because someone wealthy had rescued her, but because her talent had finally been seen. Lucien kept his promise. He never offered to buy the bakery, never suggested expanding it into a luxury franchise, never invested a single dollar. Whenever people asked why, he always answered the same way. She built this with her own hands. It belongs to her. That simple respect meant more to Beatrice than any extravagant gift ever could. One quiet Saturday afternoon, the shop buzzed with laughter as regular customers enjoyed coffee and desserts. A young couple recognized Lucien, sitting by the familiar window. The nervous husband approached with an embarrassed smile. "Mr. Armand, may I ask something?" Lucien closed the book he had been reading. "Of course. My wife and I have argued about this for months." His wife laughed. "He thinks the famous kiss was planned. I say it wasn't." Several nearby customers smiled, already knowing the story. Lucien glanced toward the kitchen, where Beatrice was decorating a birthday cake. She noticed everyone looking at him and raised an amused eyebrow. He smiled before answering. "No." The couple leaned forward. The kiss surprised me too. A ripple of laughter spread through the cafe. Lucien continued with quiet honesty. "It was simply the first honest thing my heart did, before my mind could stop it." At that exact moment, Beatrice walked over, carrying 2 slices of honey almond tart. The very dessert that had quietly connected their hearts long before either of them understood why. She placed one plate in front of him. "You still order this every week?" "I always will." "Even though it's no longer on the menu?" He smiled. "Some recipes deserve to remain personal." She laughed, shaking her head with the familiar warmth that had once helped a lonely stranger forget the weight of his title. Around them, conversations resumed. Children laughed over cupcakes. An elderly couple shared a slice of cheesecake. Someone celebrated a promotion. Another family welcomed a newborn with a custom cake. Ordinary moments. The very moments Lucien had once believed were too small to matter. Now he understood they were life's greatest treasures. Beatrice slipped her hand into his beneath the table. No cameras captured the moment. No reporters waited outside. No applause followed. This time, they didn't need an audience. The humiliation meant to break her had become nothing more than a distant memory. What endured was something far stronger. A woman who rediscovered her worth. A man who found peace where he least expected it. And a love that began not with power, but with the simple decision to protect another person's dignity when everyone else remained silent.